The night was colder than usual, and the wind outside the rundown roadside motel howled like a reminder of every door that had closed in Harper Lane's face. Inside room 14, the cheapest room she could find, Harper stood hunched over her baby's crib, her trembling fingers trying to keep little Aiden warm with blankets that smelled of bleach and rain. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, not from lack of sleep alone, but from the weight of knowing she had only $23 left to survive the rest of the week. Every heartbeat felt like a ticking clock pushing her closer to a kind of desperation she never imagined she would experience. And yet, in that suffocating silence, something unimaginable was about to unfold, something that would change not only her life, but the life of the stranger staying in the room next to hers, a man the world knew as impossibly successful, untouchably wealthy, and completely unreachable, but who would soon find himself drawn toward the fragile strength of a mother fighting silently through the night. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and life-changing miracles, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us spread more stories that touch hearts. Harper held Aiden close and breathed in the faint baby scent that reminded her why she couldn't give up. She used to have a decent life, a modest apartment, a stable job, small but steady plans for the future, but life unraveled with cruel precision. First came layoffs at her workplace, then the rising bills, then her landlord who refused to understand her situation, and then the eviction. Harper had spent the last 2 weeks living out of her old car before she finally used the last chunk of her savings to afford this motel room for 3 nights. She had never felt poorer, but she had never felt richer in love because of the little boy clinging to her. Next door, separated by a thin wall that trembled whenever the wind battered the building, sat Mason. Blake, a name that belonged to magazine covers, luxury boardrooms, and Forbes lists. A billionaire with a reputation for brilliance and a legacy inherited from generations of wealth. Except Mason wasn't there on a luxury vacation. He was running from something too, a life with too many responsibilities and not enough meaning. He had checked into the same motel under a different name, needing silence to confront the ache of losing his mother only weeks earlier. She had been the only person who reminded him that money meant nothing if your heart felt empty. And in that motel far from cameras, business meetings, and penthouse pressure, Mason wanted to feel human again. Yet the silence broke the moment he heard soft sobs coming from room 14. At first, he ignored them, assuming it was just another guest with typical motel troubles. But as the night stretched, the sound of a woman struggling to soothe her child carried through the walls, with a kind of heartbreak he couldn't shake. Something in Harper's quivering breaths reminded him of his mother, the quiet strength she had, the way she never let anyone see her pain. Mason found himself stepping toward the wall, listening not to invade privacy, but because something instinctive told him someone on the other side needed help. Harper tried her best to muffle her cries. She didn't want Aiden to sense her fear. The milk formula was running low, her car needed gas, and she still had no idea how she would afford another night. She ran her fingers over the worn motel curtains, wondering if her life would always feel like this, circles of struggle, repeating endlessly. She had applied to dozens of jobs, walked into stores with her resume, and prayed silently every night for a miracle. But the world felt blind to her efforts, until a soft knock eventually came through the wall between the rooms. But Harper didn't answer. She didn't trust strangers, especially when her baby's safety was tied to every decision she made. Instead, she sat on the floor with Aiden in her lap, letting his small heartbeat rest against her own. She tried to convince herself that this was temporary, just a season of pain. Her mother always said storms don't last forever, but she never mentioned how long they could drag on before breaking. The next morning, Harper stepped out to get cereal for Aiden with the few coins she had. She didn't know that Mason saw her through the window. She didn't notice the way her shoulders drooped, the way she wrapped her baby tightly as if shielding him from every unseen threat. Something tugged inside Mason, an urge he hadn't felt in years, a desire to help someone without the world watching or judging his intentions. By noon, bad luck struck again. Harper's old car wouldn't start. She turned the key over and over until the engine coughed smoke and died completely. The panic rose in her throat. She didn't have money for repairs or a tow truck. She held her baby, biting back tears as she whispered apologies he didn't understand. That was the moment Mason stepped outside his room, pretending it was coincidence. Everything about him looked ordinary that day: casual clothes, messy hair, no trace of the billionaire image the world glorified. Harper assumed he was just another traveler, maybe someone escaping his own life. She didn't know she was standing next to a man capable of changing her world with a single decision. He offered to help, gently, without pressure. Harper hesitated, her instincts battling her exhaustion, but something in Mason's eyes felt safe, warm even. Not pity, but genuine concern. She allowed him to look under the hood, and though he quickly realized the engine was beyond a simple fix, he didn't tell her immediately. Instead, he quietly made a call to a mechanic he trusted. He didn't mention his identity or wealth, he simply explained there was a stranded mother who needed assistance urgently. Harper stood there, hugging Aiden while Mason arranged the repair. She thought he would leave after that, but he stayed, asking softly if she needed water or food. She lied at first, saying she was fine, but Mason noticed the faint tremble in her hands, the kind people have when their body is running on empty, so he offered to get something for her and the baby, saying it was simply kindness, not charity. That word broke her. She accepted. Over the next few hours, the two strangers found themselves sharing the unspoken parts of their lives without needing long conversations. Harper's gentle strength and dedication to her baby reminded Mason of the reasons his mother once told him to stay humble. And Harper sensed something heavy behind Mason's quiet demeanor, something that made him feel familiar in a way she couldn't explain. When the mechanic told Mason privately that the car repair would cost far more than Harper could ever afford, Mason paid in full, but instructed that the receipt not reveal his payment. He didn't want her to feel indebted or embarrassed. He simply wanted her to breathe easier. The day passed slowly, but something subtle shifted between them, a connection built not on words, but on presence. Harper felt seen for the first time in months. Mason felt grounded for the first time in years. That evening, rain began pouring harder than before. The motel lights flickered, and thunder echoed across the lonely highway. Harper sat near the window, watching droplets smear down the glass, wondering why someone like Mason would care about someone like her. And in the room next door, Mason sat on the floor with his back against the wall, thinking about how meeting Harper felt like the first meaningful thing that had happened since losing his mother. The turning point arrived when Harper returned to her room after warming Aiden's bottle and found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a note written in simple handwriting, "For you and your little one. You're not alone." There was money inside, not an overwhelming amount, but enough to cover several nights and essentials. Harper burst into tears. She pressed the envelope to her chest and whispered thank yous to the universe, to the stranger next door, to any unseen force that allowed grace to find her. She didn't confront Mason or ask questions. Instead, she allowed her heart to accept that maybe kindness still existed. The next morning, Harper awoke to the hum of a repaired engine outside. Her car had been fixed. When she stepped out holding Aiden, Mason greeted her with a warm smile that carried a hint of shyness. He told her the mechanic had come early and that everything was taken care of. Harper's eyes filled with gratitude, but before she could thank him properly, Mason placed a hand over his heart, as if saying the thanks wasn't necessary. But something else happened. Mason offered her something unexpected. Not money, not pity, but an opportunity. He told her he knew of a company hiring people like her, hard-working, dedicated, unwavering in loyalty. He said he could help her get an interview, not because he felt sorry for her, but because he believed she deserved a chance to rebuild. Harper's breath caught. Opportunity felt like air after drowning. She accepted, and that decision became the first step in a miracle. Within 2 weeks, Harper secured the job. Within a month, she moved into a small but safe apartment, and slowly she built herself back up, one paycheck, one victory, one grateful smile at a time. Mason remained nearby, checking in, supporting quietly, never overstepping. Their bond grew not because of wealth or circumstance, but because their hearts recognized each other's wounds. What Harper didn't know for months was that the company he recommended was his own. Mason Blake, the name she only later saw printed on the office building, had been the man who helped her from the beginning. When she learned the truth, she confronted him with tears in her eyes, not of anger, but disbelief. And in that moment, Mason told her gently that he didn't help her because of who he was. He helped her because of who she was, a mother with a strength that rivaled storms. They stood there, two people who had once been separated by impossible worlds, now connected by a bond richer than wealth. And that bond became the beginning of something beautiful. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps us bring more inspiring real-life stories to you. Before the story ends, tell us in the comments, what part moved you the most? In the years that followed, Harper's life transformed into something she once believed was beyond her reach. Aiden grew up surrounded by love, safety, and opportunities. Harper discovered her own strength and built a future she was proud of. And Mason, who once felt empty despite all his riches, found purpose in giving, loving, and being human. Together, they created a life stitched together by resilience, faith, and destiny. A life born not from perfection, but from the most unexpected moment in a simple motel, where a struggling mother and a weary millionaire found each other in the middle of their storms. And from that motel struggle came a miracle neither of them would ever forget.